Hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking around for the Q&A of Naked Ambition, Bunny Yeager. My name's Dominique O'Neill. I'm a programmer for SF Doc Fest. It is my pleasure to introduce directors Dennis Scholl and Kareem Tapsh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so tell me, why Bunny Yeager?
Well, Kareem and I have made a film together previously, and uh, I tell stories about art and artists almost exclusively, and I love to tell Miami stories because we come from a very strange place down here. I don't think anybody who thinks about Miami doesn't think about what a complex, unusual, different place it is. And I knew of Bunny. She was pretty famous, even in Miami in her later years. And a friend of ours who's in the film, Ed, he introduced me to her, and I spent maybe an hour with her. And I said, "Oh man, got to make a film about this." And so I said to her, I said, "Let's make a film. Yeah, I'd like to make a film about it." She said, "Absolutely not. Much too busy." She was 83 at the time. She's much too busy to make a film. I'm thinking, well, okay. And so it took me 2 years to convince her to make the film. And then the day that we scheduled her interview, she didn't get there on time. They told me she was having a slow day. She was 85 at the time. And she went to the hospital and she passed away. And so I never got to interview her as a spine interview, as I like to call it, for the film. But I knew of her legendary achievements. And of course, when she passed, she was on the front page of the New York Times. So it was a story just waiting to be told. And that's kind of what Kareem and I do together. Kareem, you want to talk about your interest in doing it?
Yeah, I kind of love stories about larger than life characters, and people kind of go against the grain and live life on their own terms. And Bunny was that, to say the least. She's so far ahead of her time, and really kind of bucked against societal norms. But you know, I love her photography. Her photos are just so beautiful and so striking that that's kind of the first thing before you even know anything about who she is and her backstory that jumped out. Dennis and I had made a documentary together called The Last Resort, which was about another photographer in Miami, about two photographers in Miami, uh, Andy Sweet and Gary Monroe. And it was the Miami Beach of the 1970s, when it was the largest enclave of Jewish retirees in the country. And we had such a good time making it and collaborating, which if you're a filmmaker, you know that doesn't always happen that way, right? It's not always a fun, happy partnership, but this was really fun and happy, and we had a great time. And we uh we have very kind of complementary skills and push each other in the right ways. And we were like, well, we should do something together again, with kind of nothing immediately on the docket. And then said, well, what about we pick up this project that I had started years ago, on Bunny Yeager. And having loved her work and her life, I was like, yeah, eager to collaborate with Dennis again, I should say. That's importantly. We did it, and what we encountered was just, her life is just as remarkable as her work. And what a sheer privilege to be able to share that with folks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing to hear, Dennis, you say that you were in contact with her um before she passed, and so you must have had her blessing to do this. And one of my questions actually was what kind of considerations are there when you're working with a subject who's no longer alive and with us?
Yeah. Well, I think that when you're working to achieve the permission of somebody to make a film, you have to show them that you're respectful, and that, I say to people all the time, I don't make gotcha films. I just don't. It's just not fun for me. I don't have that kind of gene that makes me want to do that. And so my films are very much about finding someone who has had a moment, or a big career even, and then over time that has dissipated. And I try to get them at a place where they're getting that kind of second bounce off of their career. And that's what was happening with Bunny. People were coming back to her because of nostalgia, because of the burlesque, craze because of selfies. Bunny was all those things. And I was fortunate enough to catch her at just the right time. But then when she passed, you do have an added dimension to deal with, because what she might have been interested in doing with the film, maybe her family isn't. So you have to win the trust of whomever controls the person's story. And we've always been able to do that. And all we have to do is show people our films. We've made films about Cuban, I've made films about Cuban ballerinas, a 50s abstract painter, soul music in Miami in the 1960s. And in each case, the films are there to pay homage, really, to the creative artists that have been able to bring themselves to this exceptional moment in whatever their craft is. And Bunny certainly did that.
Can you tell me a little bit then about working with Bunny's children and family, especially with their difference of opinion?
Kareem?
Yeah, I would say that Bunny's daughters, Lisa and Sherry Lou, certainly have a difference of opinion about their mother's work, as you just saw them articulate in the film. But they have a very shared and strong bond in love of their mother and in admiration of all that she did. And so I think that in sitting down and talking with them, all we said was, we want you to tell your story about your mother and your relationship with your mother, and we want you to be honest, and we're gonna use it warts and all. And I think that that's what you get, right? You get very kind of honest, differing views about Bunny's work and feelings around it. And I think it was important to show that, right? Lisa, Sherry Lou moves away fairly, I think in the late 70s, early 80s, and starts a family. She moves to Ohio, and it's physically further away. And Lisa stays and becomes more intricately involved in her mother's business. And so I think that those experiences, offer kind of different perspectives at Bunny at different points in her life. But I will say that they've both been wonderful about it. They were, very honest, as you could see in the film, about their feelings about their mom's work, and about their feelings about each other's around their mom's work. So in that sense, they were really great, and have been really supportive of the film and in giving us access to stuff. And I should say, while we talk about her daughters, it's also, there's a whole slew of people around Bunny that were very important, who are now carrying on that legacy, like Sarah Jane Bloom, who purchased through her gallery, Grapefruit Moon, purchased the archive and is kind of preserving it and helping connect Bunny with new collectors and with new generations to discover her work. So there's a lot of people that are kind of keeping that legacy around, and who are willing to talk about the good, the bad, the highs and lows of what was a remarkable life.
Yeah. Speaking on that part about Sarah Jane Bloom and the archive, can you talk about what it was like sifting through her work and having to choose and going through all of that?
There's just an incredible amount of material. And of course, when you're making a documentary film, you kind of pray for documentary material. But in this case, our editor kept saying there can't be more, and of course there always was more. And we put two of our crew members in there for 2 weeks with 2 scanners just to select the images that work through the film. Because again, when we make a film all the time, we want to make sure that the art in the film becomes a character in the film. And so we had an unlimited access to everything, and boy, did we use it. It was an incredible amount of material. There were, the letters between her and Hefner are amazing. The letters in her heyday in the 50s, when she was doing business with like 17 men's magazines and just pushing things out left and right. There really is an incredible archive, and we feel very fortunate to have access to everything. most of the time when you do a documentary film, you're limited in what you have access to, and so, but there also is the other side of that, which is the editor had to sift through all of the things and make some decisions. And boy, did she do a great job. Dia Contaxis, our editor, did a really beautiful job of finding the essence of Bunny in the material and putting it in the film, showing, like these letters show how tough Bunny was. Bunny was a tough businesswoman. She just didn't take a lot of crap from people, and I love that about her. And I loved how Dia was able to work through that and to show that, what a feminist icon Bunny was, even though she was a reluctant feminist icon, to be honest.
It was really an overwhelming amount of stuff. But which is great. You want overwhelming, right? There have been other stories where you start going down the road and you're like, oh, but how are you going to tell the story? What are you going to show? And so aside from, as Dennis was saying, aside just from the photographs, which was, I mean, there was just boxes upon boxes upon boxes, an entire room of file cabinets that had been organized to some level, and then boxes that had not been organized.
Yeah.
Because Bunny, I wouldn't say a hoarder, because that has such negative implications, but I would say that Bunny smartly saves practically everything professionally.
She kept
I
a lot
mean,
of stuff.
she had a lot of stuff. You see in the film at one point, there's a page from a calendar from the 50s where she had made notes on that she kept in, and here we are in the mid 2000s. And what that leads to is making really tough decisions story-wise, because there's so many things, so many interesting asides that we could have gone to. One of my favorite ones that just didn't work into the film was that Bunny was in correspondence with Howard Hughes to cast for casting for some of his films. So she was kind of out here looking at like, oh, this is a beautiful young aspiring actress that you might want to consider. And that went on for several years, never made it into the film because we just couldn't find a way to make it fit. But that was just one of those folks who was in her orbit, in her life. And I feel like Gay Talese, there was a Gay Talese connection at one point too. There's just so many cultural icons that she was in contact with and connected with that didn't make it into the film because there was just, you have to make tough decisions.
Careen convinced me, which is a very interesting moment for us in making the film. I didn't get that important interview with Bunny before she passed, but I had been gathering reel after reel, clip after clip of her. And there was a ton of early stuff of her on camera. And Careen convinced me that could kind of replicate what we needed to get from her in terms of her early career. So that was very, very important. And you'll notice in the film that we don't really show the Bunny in her later years very much because she wanted to preserve her looks in almost like amber. And so we honored that in the film. You really don't see 80-year-old Bunny or very, very much, a couple of seconds, but because that was important to her. And so we that's a real big editing decision to not take, when your subject is having that additional moment at the end of her life, to not use all those interviews, because there were interviews with the Associated Press and CNN and all sorts of things. And we decided to let Bunny be remembered as the Bunny that she was in the 50s and 60s. And it was a big decision, a difficult decision.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like she's like the perfect candidate for a documentary. So I'm so glad you two got to it. So in addition to like the visual media, I love like the music of the film and the tone that is set. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about tone setting in the film.
Kareem, why don't you take a whack?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think that setting the tone we did this a couple of different ways, and it was very kind of measured. For one, the bulk of Bunny's work that is kind of mostly associated with her happened in the 50s and 60s. So it's very mid-century. And so we wanted the vibe of that to be visually represented throughout the film. And I think you see that in a couple of ways. One is certainly music choices, which you also kind of see that guides the changing in eras. throughout the film. But the other is visually, tonally, in just the setting. So you know, you'll there are scenes, as you could see, where we show kind of all the books that Bunny
Mhm.
wrote in a mid-century living room set. Where you also, by the way, those are her actual two of her actual cameras that you see there, because she even saved, and she had tons of cameras. So
Wow.
that's an example of that. But also when we set a lot of our interviews, so you know, for both Larry King and Adita Von Teese, we rented a home in the Hollywood Hills. That was a mid-century house where we set that. We wanted there to be a cohesiveness through with the images and her work, which was so mid-century for a very long time, and the look and vibe of the film. So I think that that's,
Mhm.
we kind of set that tone. The other tonal thing is that you'll see is just kind of the way the film kind of chronologically traverses her life, and that there's ups and downs. And so I think that that you see those tonal moments come through in photo selections for sure, but also in how we kind of weave those highs and lows. And it, you know, in a weird way, so you just kind of see this changing America that's going on. I think this is a film very much about Bunny, but it's also, if you take a step back, you see a very changing country
Mhm.
in which Bunny is working. And so we wanted that to be a part of it, and infused into the tone of the film.
And a shout out to Melissa at Groove Garden, our music supervisor. She's done my last 3 or 4 films, and they just get it. You know, they just understand what you're trying to do. They listen. They give you tons of options. It's just a great working relationship. And you know, as you make a bunch of films, you build these teams, and you when you get somebody like her, or our cinematographer, you know, Ed Talavera, or our editor, Dia Contax, you just never let them go. You know, you just know that you're going to have a much smoother path through the film because people are understanding, you know, what your vision is, because they've seen it 3 or 4 times now. They know you make films about art and artists. They know you're art centric and you're focused on the art. You have to still tell your story from a human perspective, but they get it. And Melissa gets it. So I'm super happy to have worked with her again on this film. And she brought us some really great choices.
Amazing. There's that good moment with Larry King where it's this little aside, and it's just, I feel like it's just a tribute to the time period in Miami Beach. Can you talk a little bit about including that?
How could you not put it in? It has nothing to do with the film. It doesn't matter. I have to give Kareem full chops for that. I mean, he just sat down with Larry, and you know, it's the last film Larry has been involved in. You know, it's he passed soon thereafter. But Kareem just, I don't know, he got him going, and once he got him going, he just got out of the way. Which is, you know, as an interviewer, sometimes you just need to understand that you just press play and go get a sandwich or something, you know, because Kareem just had him going. And when he brought back the footage, I had to leave during that one. I wasn't actually there. He brought back the footage. He says, "You're not going to believe this." I was like, "Oh, come on. How good could it be?" Well, it was that good. So there's a couple of places in the film where you just say, you know what? It's the 50s. It's the 60s. Here it is. You know, be happy. Kareem, talk about that day, though. That was crazy.
Yeah, you know, documentary filmmakers, there's a term we say, someone's a bite machine, right? They just give you one sound bite
Mm,
after the other. And I mean, it's no shock that Larry King is a great storyteller, right?
mhm.
Um, and he was just he was, first of all, he showed up 45 minutes earlier than is expected, and his hair and makeup person had not arrived yet. So Larry had shown up waiting around to get, you know, the hair and makeup very nice. And but you know, he was eager to get going. He wanted to start and go. And it was just, you know, we asked him questions certainly, but there's a couple of things I had through the years heard him talk about. He lived in Miami for 20 years, so it was where his career really took off. And it's also where he met all of these major names, right? And so it was just kind of like, again, like Dennis says, it's a little bit of press play and get out of the way. And I'll say there's probably 4 different anecdotes, kind of like that one. The other 3 don't make it into the film, but that one was such a laugh. But also, you know, it has nothing directly to do with Bunny, as you hear Larry say in the film. But what it does kind of tell you is it paints the picture of this era and this time in Miami Beach. what it was like. You know, I would say in as you're making the film, you kind of have test audiences. We shared it with very few people. We don't normally always kind of have big test audience, depending on the film. And we shared it, and a few people were like, "Yeah, it takes us a little bit away from it." And we really considered that. We were like, "Well, maybe this is not the right choice." But I think we both ultimately, and Dia too, we kind of always laughed afterwards and fought and like, you know what? Larry deserves it. I think Bunny would have loved that moment because she had a good sense of humor. And it is actually one of the most satisfying moments when the film's played. When we've been at festivals together or separately, I will always kind of know where it is, and I'll pop in and I'll just hear. And if the audience laughs and it's a good laugh, I'll know how they respond to the rest of the film based on that moment. And I think kind of as a filmmaker, you kind of always know there's moments where you expect the audience to do a thing, and if they do it, you've done your job or you got them where you want to. And that's just one of those. And Larry was great. And then once he was done, he's like, I gotta go. It was just very like he delivered one right after the other. And we're again, what an honor to have him. It's like I believe it's his last filmed interview for a project outside of his own show that he did. So
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
you wind up shooting, 20, 30 hours for every hour you use. With Larry, you shoot 40 minutes and you use 32. I mean, it's just that good.
yeah. I was gonna say it's too bad we don't have DVDs anymore because it sounds like he would have had some good stuff for the extras.
Well, Dennis and I have very kind of casually talked about like we have to do something with it. We've not.
Yeah.
It's a very casual conversation, but it is too good, and I think we'll noodle around something with it because yeah.
Yeah. Good. Um, so on Bunny's legacy, it's kind of devastating that she's gone under acknowledged for so long. So on that note, can you share a little bit about your hopes for the film?
Dennis?
Well, this film is a film to pay homage to Bunny, and I think we've succeeded in that. Um, we we've generally been able to achieve distribution for our films. Great distributors. I've been working with Kino Lorber for the last few films. They're great indie, film distributors. We want the film to be seen, in as many places as we can. And I think the great thing about what's happened is that before Bunny passed, she had that reconsideration moment. It didn't happen after she passed, although she's continued to build her legacy since her passing. So I'm just happy that we were able to be part of that great reconsideration of Bunny and her work. I think at the end there's a clip in the film that shows about how we've all become selfie machines, and Bunny's granddaughter says rightly so, she kind of invented the selfie. So that's the kind of thing I want to do with these films, is to give people the opportunity to be seen again toward the end of their career, when perhaps their career was at a different place at one point, and to give them that last little bump. So, Kareem, what do you think? I mean, what would you like to see happen?
I think what I'd love to see is the art world embrace Bunny's work more. I think what a great time to start looking at some museums, particularly those who are focusing on photography, to bring in Bunny into their permanent collections. I'd love to see her work, her body of work looked at within that kind of context. But also, what I'd love to see, I think, and what we've seen with some of our other projects, is a newfound appreciation for Bunny and her artwork. So many people just think of like men's magazines, right? And you think of that as just like throwaway things, with like of a certain era. But there were wonderful artists involved in the making of these publications. I mean, and maybe none so from as a photographer than Bunny in particular. And so being able to kind of look at it within the context of the time and how ahead of it of the time it was one of the only women photographers photographing for men's magazines. And just like what a remarkable life of somebody who lived against the grain, really kind of tried to do it all, had a family, had children, had a supportive husband, You know, and she was a trailblazer. So I'm hoping that folks see the film and say, I want to know more about Bunny. I'd love to find a way to buy one of her prints. I want my museums to have one in their collection. I really hope it just is a conversation starter and something that keeps the conversation going, because she deserves to be in our zeitgeist for many years to come.
What he said.
All
It
right.
never
Well, thank
works
you
that
so
way, by the way. He's the articulate one. I'm just the loud one.
well, thank you so much for being here at SF Doc Fest. Thanks for bringing Bunny's story to the forefront and honoring her memory and her contribution to the art world. It really is a really incredible story, and I'm grateful that you are sharing it.
Well, thanks to the fans for coming out, and we appreciate you guys watching the film. And Dominique, thanks for being so prepared and asking such great questions. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
This is, I think, the third film that I've played at SF Docs Fest. So I'm a very proud alum of the
Oh,
festival. I
tight.
used to spend a lot of time in San Francisco and have a lot of friends out there, particularly in the Mission. So I love that it's playing at the Roxy, which is one of my favorite places. So thanks all for coming.
Thanks.